everybody. Welcome back to Something to Complain About. This is A. I'm here with T. T, how you doing? How's your week
I'm
been?
doing hey, I'm doing well. It's been a good week. It's been a busy week, but the highlight has been I went to the farmer's market again and scored some good deals. And this time I brought the husband and the dogs,
Oh,
and we had a good time. And as you know, I have two Chihuahuas
you
and a
do.
stroller. So people noticed us when we are out in public.
You do
People have
really? People notice you with two chihuahuas and a stroller.
Yeah, they do. They
I
actually
imagine.
do. Um, because I'm one of those women now. Uh, but
You are. Yes.
and I don't care. I think that's one of the blessings of aging is like with each year I care less and less. And I'm already known in the neighborhood as the woman with the stroller pushing the two dogs, walking the neighborhood. I wasn't the only one at the farmer's market with a dog stroller, though. But I was the only one that I saw that had two dogs in a stroller.
Oh,
So, but it's always fun to see people's reactions, especially grown men and little kids.
really?
They're like, with grown men and usually, kind of like big burly guys that are pretty stoic. And then it's sort of like they look down into the stroller and they do a double take. And then they kind of start to laugh, which is fine. And then of
Yeah.
course the kids are like, oh, where's that? And people usually see Charlie first because he's bigger. And then a few seconds later there's this second dog. And so yeah, it's fun. Like they get a lot of positive attention and we get to see other dogs. And of course, mine, they hate everybody. There's always a bit of drama, but we enjoy the dogs. All the children, not so much, but yeah, they tend to be well behaved, but it's kids.
Yeah,
And kids are like little psychic vampires for me. They just drain,
they are.
drain energy, even if they're just doing kid stuff and they're being typical kids. So, but no, we had a good time and it was a gorgeous day. And yeah, so how about you?
It was a busy week here too. Um, no farmer's market to go to, but we do see dogs a lot in this neighborhood. We had dogs. We don't have dogs anymore. They got old and, of course, passed away. As you know, but our listeners probably don't. But it's really common to see dogs everywhere here in the city. And when you talk about having them in strollers, it reminds me I don't usually see them in strollers here, but it's really common for me to see them in backpacks, which sounds really weird, but it's not uncommon to get on the train or the bus and see a small dog, like a small corgi or a chihuahua or something. Well, I guess I've never seen a chihuahua in one of those, but like a corgi or some other kind of small dog in a backpack as somebody's trying to go on transit. Our dogs, even though we had a small Boston Terrier, he would never have been okay with that. I don't think we could have put him in a stroller either. And of course, the other two dogs we had were way too big for the ones. Like they would not have tolerated it.
We saw a Boston Terrier today and um, Charlie, having known and was friends with your Boston,
Yeah,
every time he sees one, he's always like, Chaz, Chaz. And
yeah,
so, and of course, in true Boston Terrier form, he got up and came over to Charlie, and Charlie realized that it's not Chaz. And we had a little, kind of a bit of not a scuffle, but the little Boston, he wanted to be friends. And Charlie was like, yeah, no, no, no,
yeah. You're
no.
not who I think you are, so I don't need you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of sad because every time we see a Boston, Charlie's like, yeah. And then he's like, "Oh, that's not my friend." I'm like, no, sweetie, that's not your friend. So we do the same thing with German Shepherds because he was friends with a couple German Shepherds. And it's like, no, I think this one might eat you. This, you know,
Yes. Yes. We we have a lady down the street here who is probably in her 70s, and she has a very young and rambunctious German Shepherd who she really struggles to control. Like when they're out for a walk, because that dog wants to see and touch and talk to and become friends with everybody. And when our dogs were still alive, we would literally cross the street to stay away from her because she couldn't keep the dog on the leash to herself. Like she couldn't stop the dog from getting like up in people's faces. So it was honestly kind of a struggle with that one. I don't know if it would have been aggressive, but like Annie was big enough to stand her ground, right? But Chaz Chaz thought he was big enough, but Chaz was 20 pounds. So like, or maybe 24 pounds or something like that. So he was not going to take on a 75-pound German Shepherd, as much as his little Napoleon complex would have suggested he
yeah.
could.
Yeah. And but I dogs, I don't think ever realize like what size they are. And I know one time, Ace, one of the German Shepherd neighbors, he was all excited to see me one time, and he was still fairly young. So he, of course, jumped up on his hind legs. He towered over me and almost knocked me over.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I
Yeah.
love
I,
you too, Dirk.
I think that's kind of little dogs don't know they're little and big dogs forget they're big. Right.
Yeah.
Cause Annie was 70-ish pounds and she would try to get into your lap as if she were 20 and she couldn't do it and you couldn't have her do it. But they tend to forget. I think they just have opposite, right? Like they just forget who's what. So
I think that's true. And I think of like with my little Mia, who's 7.5 pounds, trying to jump into the bed, because I have to pick up both dogs and put them on the floor and everything else. But like she will stand there for minutes at a time and I'll hear her go, eh, eh, eh," because she's trying to jump into the bed. And even with her best jump, we can't even make it what the height of the mattress. But yet she still tries. She persists.
she
Uh,
sure does.
yeah, she does. She's tenacious. She is, and has enemies all over the place. I mean, from her point of view,
Of
everybody else
course.
thinks everyone else thinks she's adorable and they want to pet her. And then we go into goblin mode, and then they're like, "Oh, maybe not." So, but this conversation about dogs, and you and I are both dog lovers, leads me to think about an article that I shared with you earlier this week, where and along with almost everything else it seems now, uh, favorite dog breed are
Yeah.
now they vary by the generation. And so was it Rover that did this survey? And again, this is not scientific, but it was a survey of 1,000 US pet parents. And the question were dog breed preference along age demographic lines. And I thought this was really interesting because I'd never even thought of it that way.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
think I have either.
yeah. So, but I was kind of surprised too to see what the most popular dog breed was by generation.
Yeah.
So for the baby boomers, it's Chihuahuas. So I don't know what that says about me. Um,
I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I know, right? Gen X, Labrador retrievers, millennials, German shepherds. So that makes me wonder about your 70-some-year-old neighbor. Like, is she a millennial at heart? And then Gen Z golden retrievers. One thing that was
Hmm.
not 100% clear to me in looking at this is I wasn't quite sure if these were, as you're talking to someone like, oh, this is my favorite breed, or if this is actually like, this is what I own. This is what I have at home. And the reason I think that is because although like Chihuahuas and German Shepherds are pretty common breeds, they're not among like the most common, depending on you, what information you're looking at. Like
Yeah.
quite often, Chihuahuas drop out of the top 10 and sometimes even the top 15. And with boomers, we're talking about a pretty large piece of the step population that I would expect to see a lot more Chihuahuas running around than what I do see. So, but it also made me wonder, is that, so I guess, because I've never, I mean, I guess I've thought of age, not generation label wise, but in choosing a dog, there's so many considerations that you have, right?
Yeah.
Your own personal preferences, where you are in life. Are you in an apartment? Do you have a house with a fenced in backyard? Are you working 60 hours a week? What's your energy level? Do you have allergies? All these
Yeah.
different things. So I'm wondering if like a small breed like a Chihuahua isn't popular among older individuals because they're maybe downsizing, the energy levels lower. Um, a lot of people don't train their chihuahuas. Lord knows I have tried, not very successful. Two worst students I've ever had in my life. But it now as always, I'm always kind of like, oh, what else is kind of going on here? And of course, we don't know if it's a representative sample and that. But what are your thoughts on the overall findings of these four most common breeds?
Yeah. I mean, I wondered about the representatives of the sample, and then it occurred to me like this is supposed to be fun and not actually like scientific, right? So you're right.
True.
We have no idea if this is a representative sample. I don't know which Gen Xers they got a hold of. It seems like the comment that they made in the article, uh, at least I'm not Gen Xers, but boomers, I should say, about boomers and their chihuahuas was that it seemed like boomers were more empty nesters at that point. They like their pint-sized dogs, and there's lots of pint-sized dogs, but they're chihuahuas, I suppose, because it kind of reminded them of having a child. I guess my question is, did you have an unruly, difficult child that you didn't train very well, and that's why I recommend why like I mean, did you have really bad kids and you wanted more bad kids, and that's why you got them? I would think a Chihuahua, and this is just me, I would think a Chihuahua would be harder for somebody who's older, right? Because they're going to require more attention, more energy, not in the way like a German Shepherd would, because they are harder to train and they're
Mhm.
they're a little bit more aggressive because they're harder to train in that sense, right? Like they are protectively aggressive in that sense. But
And
it sort of surprised me that that was a boomer thing because I can't think of a single boomer that I know that had a Chihuahua.
I I cannot think of one that I know that has one now. No, wait, I do know one, but she also doesn't have any grandchildren. And that's one thing I'm kind of wondering. Like, my grandparents had a Chihuahua. Her name was Ginger. I loved her. And she was a ginger color. That's why her name was Ginger. But Ginger bit one of my cousins. And then Ginger went to go live at another house, or at least that's the official story. Because I
Right.
remember I cried and cried because I loved Ginger. And my grandmother goes, "Well, you're the only one who did." Um, it's
Okay.
but I mean, I guess that would be one concern I would have as an older adult, especially like if I had children who may be starting families of their own. A
Yeah.
Chihuahua is not the best dog to have around little children. My husband, even today when we were out, and of course my dogs are cute and Mia is like stuffed animal size and stuff, and kids always want to pet them. And we always say no because the dogs don't want them. The dogs don't like children. And I mean, it is kind of heartbreaking. Like today, three little boys asked, and I said, no, they really don't like kids. They're scared of people. And like, you could just see his face collapse.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, oh, that's terrible. And I'm like, well, we can't. I don't want either the kid or the dog in a situation that is not good for either one of them because, like most people I know who are afraid of dogs or don't like dogs, they had a bad situation usually in childhood
Yeah.
where they were bit or scared or yeah. So, but yeah, so that kind of surprises me with as territorial as Chihuahuas can be.
Yeah. They actually offer also a whole nother thought here about it. Actually, I do find a little bit more compelling. So the empty nester thing I don't find particularly compelling, but I'm not a boomer, so what do I know? The they note something about the trends in urbanization and jobs, right? So they're saying that a lot of boomers find themselves in urban and suburban settings where having smaller dogs is just easier, right?
Mm,
Like,
mhm.
and that makes sense. If you're retiring or getting ready to retire and you live in a city, it's easier to have a smaller dog because you're probably going to be in a smaller house or a smaller apartment or a condo or something. If you are retired, maybe you've given up your house because you don't want to do the yard work and you have a condo. And so it's a smaller area. So I get having a smaller dog. That makes more sense to me than the empty nester thing. Because like any
Well,
dog could fill that role, right? But smaller dogs make
exactly.
more sense in that thing in head.
And in a lot of places, like if someone downsizes and they rent, or maybe they go like into a co-op or something like that, a lot of times there are breed restrictions and size restrictions.
Yeah, that's true.
So some of those you can only have up to like a 25-pound dog. That eliminates all but the small breed. So then it's kind of a default.
Yeah,
So for our generation and growing up in the country, I always think of these as hunting dogs and farm dogs,
yeah, me too.
labs,
I mean, I feel like
Labradors.
that one surprises me a little bit, but when you read some of the explanations in the article, it kind of makes sense. Um, for me though, like we had a black lab growing up, and we lived obviously in a rural area. I mean, it was a good dog. No big deal. I mean, they're big dogs. They get to be big dogs. They're very
Mhm.
active dogs. They need to be active. Um, it's interesting to me the way they talk about it, and like I kind of wonder how they conducted the survey. Like, were they just asking people to tell stories about their dogs? Because that sounds like a fun job. How do I get that job? Like,
I
that
don't
sounds
know.
like way more fun than the crap you and I got to do every day.
Hey,
But
well, wait. Maybe this is a new podcast idea. As we start our empire, we have just the dog podcast. Tell us about your dog.
yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of a fun day. I mean, they talk about it as like obviously we're sort of one of the smallest generations, right? But they talk about Gen X specifically uh, as wanting to be burdens on society. We have the highest rates of divorce, at least as children, and we have some significant economic instability. So
Mhm.
that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. But they look at labs kind of a more popular breed because of their playful, affectionate temperament. They can kind of go everywhere, do anything, center of attention kind of dogs. So it seems almost as if in our generation, because we have higher rates of divorce, fewer children, that kind of thing, I wonder if the lab becomes a sort of family replacement. I mean, a little bit like they're talking about for boomers, right? That when they're trying to say empty nester a little, but of course they're an older generation, smaller areas, but we're talking about like Gen Xers who want to be completely independent, like leave me alone, whatever generation. And then the lab allows for that, or is part of that kind of idea where, we just kind of is kind of an all-purpose dog. I think they're kind of big, but in the city, it is strange to me in this city that we see so many big dogs. We absolutely do. Even with people who live in apartments, they've got big dogs.
Yeah, but there are some big dogs that are lazy and don't need a whole lot of
True.
exercise. The ones that always kill me are like the people that have huskies and no backyard fence or area for the husky to run.
Yeah.
Or like, a lot of the working dogs, and which I think husky is. And sometimes I wonder too, with Gen X, with us all being about the age where those of us who have kids, the kids are now like, starting out on their own. If some of these dogs aren't kind of like the family dog that they had while the kids were growing up, while their
Yeah.
kids were growing up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and then the German Shepherd one, this is really kind of interesting to me. Um,
That
oh,
millennials prefer German shepherds.
yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
love German Shepherds too, but then when I sit down and actually do like a little feasibility study, they do not fit into my life at all.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So I found that interesting. And then what was the last one? Golden Retrievers, which I don't know, Golden Retrievers are also good family dogs.
Well, and they're also comfort dogs. But the interesting thing on the German Shepherd side of it is like the conversation they have in the article makes it sound like it's from a generation of people who feels like they need to be protected, right?
And
Like, so they're used to seeing in media, whether it's movies or TV shows or social media channels or whatever, they're used to seeing German Shepherds in roles, right? And this is, of course, roles, it's acting, right? I mean, I guess they're dogs, but whatever. In movies and in whatever kind of media you want to talk about, as the dogs that are protective and super connected to their human and going to be protective at all costs. And so I think maybe for a generation who probably grew up in the height of school shootings,
yeah,
right?
oh,
Where
true.
they had that was when it really, really started, is in that generation where we started to see, right? Columbine would have been in generation, if I remember. But what year was
Yeah,
Columbine?
99,
Yeah, I think it was
90.
late 90s. So you're talking, we would have already been in college, maybe even almost
But
out of
but
college.
they but they would have been kids at the time,
Yes. So
like
these
school
guys,
age, yeah.
you've got all this angst in that age group. And then I think in that sense, the German Shepherd probably makes sense because, that's part of why the old lady down the street has a German Shepherd is she wants it for protection because she lives alone now. Her husband passed away, so she got a big dog to have at home in her two-bedroom condo right down the street. So I don't think the dog would hurt anybody, but people don't
Have
know that.
have you seen some of the videos that have been posted where And a few of them have been like with big dogs where someone like breaks in and the owner's camera picks up the interaction between like the burglar and the dogs. And like how often dogs just they they want the attention and like the burglar comes in and gives them a few pets and then
Yep.
he still thinks like the dogs just stand there and watch it all go down. And it's always like some big breed that you would think would protect
Right.
properly.
Well, because they've not been trained to do that, right? Like people
Right.
get these big dogs and they don't realize they
You have
don't
to true.
come pre-programmed to tear somebody's arm off, right? Like
Right.
one of my friends had a dog for a long time that was a German with wire hair, I think is what it was.
Uh-huh.
Um, but he was trained to be protected of the people at home. So when he would go away for work, the wife and the kid at home, he never worried about it.
But see, that's the thing because can you have to train them to protect specifically what you want them to protect.
Yeah.
So an empty house, dog may or may not care depending on how you train them. If a family member is home. But what I find funny is like the most um the breeds that would scare me the most are the smaller ones. Like I think of my host mother in the UK and they had three little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel who were just little balls of love and joy. And I remember I was staying with them and like a repairman came over and she said, well, wait just a minute. Let me put the dogs down. And he was like, oh, yeah, he's looking at these little fluff balls. And she's like, no, if one of them would get it in their head that you were going to harm me, they would go after, they will attack. So it does, and same way with my little dogs, my little 7 pounder, she'll fight to the death. Like somebody's going to the hospital or the morgue when Mia's done with you, and she don't care who who
Right.
goes with. But then, I've seen huge dogs that, yeah, come on in, rob us blind, or oh, I don't care for this family member, so go nuts.
I think our dogs would have been like I don't think like Annie would have wanted to get pet. Chad's would have barked because he barked at everything. But I Maggie may have. Maggie probably would have been more aggressive. If it was a stranger, she would have been more burying her teeth and aggressive. But I'm not sure if any of them would have been super protective. But it's kind of weird when you look at the whole pattern here, right? You've got boomers who are looking for family replacements, kind of, right? Like something to keep them busy, which is interesting. You've got Gen Xers who are basically looking for dogs that mirror independence, right? That will be independent with them and also whatever dogs, because they don't care about anybody else. It's all just Gen Xers and their dog, right? And then you've got your millennials who really basically need a protector. And then you've got your Gen Zers who, forgive me, Gen Zers need a therapy dog. Like golden retrievers, right? They're cuddly, sweet, happy, always affirming. I mean, most dogs are fairly affirming, but like this is one of those species. So you kind of see a weird pattern, and maybe weird's the wrong word here, but you see an interesting pattern between what the different generations gravitate to. And it's surprising to me that given the tumult of the lives of millennials, they want protectors. And then you see the Gen Zers who are able to notice the tumultuous nature of other people's lives and are probably the most therapy ridden or attending generation anyway, getting a special dog that helps them with some emotional control. Gen Xers don't care about emotional control. We just care about being alone with our dog, having a good time, and who cares what anybody else does. But that's not necessarily the case, with everybody else. So it's funny how that goes. But
So
it was kind of an interesting article because I never really thought of dividing these things out. And I realize the scientists and both of us would like to go back and be like, okay, do this survey with real representative data so that we could, like, who the hell knows what any of this means? I mean, how accurate any of it is.
Well, okay, but I do have 2 questions for you,
Yeah.
and this is more meaningful to me than this survey. What's first one, what's your favorite dog breed?
I really loved my Boston Terrier. So I mean, if I get another dog someday, well, I would say it would be a Boston, but the truth is we would rescue whichever dog we found that we connected with. So it could be a big dog. I never thought I'd like a big dog, but whatever breed Annie really was would be great. That was fine too.
Annie was what my dad would call a Heinz 57.
Yes, she absolutely was 57. She was, as my grandfather would have called it that too. My parents probably
Yeah.
as well. She was an, like, nobody knew exactly what she was.
That's right. Whenever I would ask him about our ancestry on his side, "Oh, you're a Heinz 57. You're a little bit of everything,"
Yeah.
which explains a lot. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I I never would have thought I would have a Chihuahua,
Yeah.
let alone 2. Um, and now here I am. And I really cannot think of any breeds that I don't like. I mean, I like them all because 'cause they're dogs. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's kinda like I approach dogs like I do people, is the personality,
Right.
because the personality matters over anything else. Although I will say some of the bigger dogs, the slobber a lot, that is gross.
Yes.
Like, I I slipped in Great Dane slobber while serving breakfast to my brother,
Yeah.
and I ended up going across the floor on my knees for about 6 feet because it's slick,
Yeah.
and and ended up breaking my finger, but you know what? That plate full of eggs and bacon, not one spill. So she
Talent.
just need those old waitress skills, that muscle memory. But yeah, my, broken finger, every time I look at it and I go, "Oh, yeah." Titus slobbered all over the floor and Aunt P didn't see it and she went for a ride. And then growing up, one of my friends, her mom had a Saint Bernard, and my head could fit in that dog's mouth, and he would
Mhm.
drool, but his drool would stain clothes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's normal or not. So that was kinda gross, but loved them just the same. Yeah.
Well, and
There's
I think that's kind of the interesting line here is also like people who are rescuing animals have a different, I think, approach to how they choose a
Mhm.
dog versus people who are always getting dogs from breeders. I mean, we got Chaz from a breeder. I did in back in 2005. I all I knew at the time was I liked Boston Terriers and I wanted a Boston Terrier and I didn't really know how to find one in small town North Dakota. So we found one through a breeder in North Dakota, right? So I would never do that again because I've learned a lot in the it's been 19 years since I got him. But there are lots of ways now that I'm aware of that you can rescue Boston. So I would probably get more Bostons, but we go through rescue. But there are also very good rescues near us where we probably just go in the door and be like, okay, show us what you've got. Let's see what we can figure out. Because I don't like a dog's a dog. I mean, you're going to connect with one or two or whatever then you're good. People who really want to get the specific breeds that they want and are willing to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for them, I think that's a different thing. Like
it's a different
in
mindset.
I
Yeah.
think it's status. Like I think for them, this is more of a I want the type of dog I want because I think it's I hate to say cool, but cool, right? Like that's probably how it works, but I would just rescue them. That's me. And I would prefer, let's just put it this way. I would prefer to spend my whole day working with dogs or around dogs than people. which makes me probably very much Gen X because I would
Yeah.
take my my Labrador Retriever and go. I'd be fine.
If there were just more jobs where you could avoid humanity completely, right?
Yes, and I think that's kind of really common for our generation too. Is like we would be just fine if we could work remotely and see the few people we like from time to time and not have to deal with the nonsense. So this is kind of fun. It's kind of fun to talk about dogs instead of some of the other more serious stuff that we've talked about in the previous episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. So one final question.
Yeah.
Do you trust people who don't like dogs? And do you trust your dog's judgment of people?
It's the same answer. I do not trust people who don't like dogs or are not good with dogs. And I absolutely trust my dogs or the dogs I know if they don't like those people. Do you?
Too.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We don't,
Dogs are
I don't
good at,
think,
I think dogs are just very good at knowing if you are full of crap or if you are fake, or if you're actually a decent human being. And so, like, I think I trust the dog more than I trust the people most of the time.
yeah, me too. All right. So for our listeners, first of all, do you have a dog? And what kind of dog do you have? Do you have a favorite dog breed? And do we have any other questions? Anything else dog related? Just throw it in.
I'm kind of curious what our listeners think about the survey itself. Like, do you find that it fits what you know? Or do you think this is just a beginning point for a conversation? Because I don't really feel like it totally fits what I see in practice, but maybe other people do. So yeah, just give us your thoughts on this actual. I don't know. I don't really want to call it a phenomenon because it's just kind of a situation, I suppose. Add your comments, be civil. Also, be sure to like and subscribe, share with your friends, and remember to check back next week for something else to complain about.
Be good, everyone.
T, it was good to see you. Have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next time.
All right. You too. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.